Ladies and gentlemen, we are about to start the opening session of the online international conference, and we will soon have the Minister of Tourism, Sports and Culture. We will soon have the Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism and the Dean of KDI School of Public Policy and Management join us here in the conference venue. 지금 문화체육관광
Ladies and gentlemen, Minister Yang Woo Park of the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, and also Dr. Jong-il Yu, Dean of KDI School of Public Policy and Management, have now come up to the stage. Please welcome the two speakers with a big round of applause.
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Park Yang-woo, Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, has joined us on the stage in the conference venue in Seoul, and Dean Yu Jong-il of KDI School of Public Policy and Management has also joined us on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome them with a big round of applause. Now, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and good morning. My name is Oh Seung from Arirang TV, and today I am your Master of Ceremony for the online international conference on effective public communication for an inclusive response and recovery from COVID-19. It is with great honor and pleasure that I welcome you today and will walk you through the conference. And on the behalf of our hosts, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude and welcome all of you for gracing this session with your participation today. The session is streaming on KTV's YouTube channel, so for those of you joining us online, thank you very much. We are very pleased to have you with us. And this session, today's conference, has been organized by the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, and Korea Development Institute's School of Public Policy and Management. I sincerely hope everyone participating today will have a meaningful time, and I very much look forward to what will undoubtedly be very fruitful and meaningful discussions. So without further ado, let us begin the online international conference. First, we will hear the opening remarks from Mr. Park Yang-woo, Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism of the Republic of Korea, and he is, of course, with us here on the stage. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a warm round of applause. Now, Minister Park will give his welcoming remarks. Minister, the floor is all yours.
자, 이거 동시 통역이 되는가요? 아니면은 어떤가요?
네,
그러면
동시
그냥
통역이
우리말로
됩니다.
할까요? 네.
Hello, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am Park Yang-woo, Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism of Korea. They say these days, unity in the COVID era is achieved by dividing. The COVID-19 response process requires a different kind of cooperation and communication than the crises of the past. More than any words, wearing a mask, and more than any gesture, social distancing convey more care and concern for others. The Korean government has made all necessary information transparent to the public regarding COVID-19. The results show that 83% of the people have a positive view of the government's response. Trusting the government's policy, the Korean public supported healthcare personnel and complied with protection measures such as writing in the entry list when visiting public facilities and disclosing their movements after being infected. As such, COVID-19 will remain a valuable example of public communication based on mutual trust, producing good results for all. Then what about the response to climate change? I'm sure it is no different. No one individual, no matter how good-willed, no single company, no matter how financially well-equipped, and no one government, no matter how good the policies, can respond effectively to this challenge alone. It's an issue that individuals, businesses, governments, and indeed the world must work together to find solutions through cross-border communication. We are also at a turning point in a new technology paradigm centered on artificial intelligence, or the fourth industrial revolution. Whether a new technology will be a boon or bane to the humankind also depends on communication. What we need is communication based on the wisdom of humanities, beyond the logic of capital and science. At a time when public communication is becoming more important, I believe it is very meaningful to host a forum for establishing international standards for public communication and international cooperation with the OECD, which has been emphasizing the importance of communication and participation from the standpoint of open government. I would like to thank Deputy Secretary General Jeffrey Schlagenhoff for attending on behalf of the OECD today. The KDI School of Public Policy and Management, KDIS, has also helped us a lot. So we have the KDIS President Yoo Jung-il sitting right next to me. I would like to thank you very much for your presence. I look forward to KDIS continued research and education in the field of public communication. Let me also thank the speakers from all over the world for your presentations and in-depth discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, we will beat COVID. But one thing we should all remember is that as important as beating the virus is the process of overcoming and recovering thereafter. We must prepare for a healthier and caring community while minimizing the necessary sacrifice. To do this, our health and economic measures must be firmly rooted in our culture and communication. I'm someone who believes in the power of culture and art. I believe that our communities, worn out and weary from COVID-19, will be enlivened by culture and communication. Thanks to participation and cooperation by the people, we were able to overcome a number of crises, but the crisis continues to this day. But if we can maintain communication and trust in each other, I'm sure that we will be able to overcome this crisis yet again. I hope today's discussion will further develop public communication and open the door for solidarity and cooperation in the post-COVID era. Last, I send my greetings to everyone who are participating offline and online. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much. Welcome to you all, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Minister Park, for your very inspirational words on how we can overcome this crisis with trust and communication. Next, we will have our welcoming speeches. First, Heren's Ho, Dr. Yoo Jung-il will greet us with his remarks. Dr. Yoo Jung-il is the Dean of Korea Development Institute School of Public Policy and Management, and of course he is with us on the stage. Dr. Yoo, the floor is all yours.
Thank you. Mr. Yang-woo Park, Minister of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Mr. Jeffrey Schlagenhoff, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD, distinguished speakers and participants, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. It is in this time of unprecedented hardship in the global community, we have gathered for this international conference to discuss the vision and strategies for future public communication, to explore ways in which we can enhance the role of public communication in responding to and overcoming the unprecedented challenges the COVID-19 has put to us. It's my great honor and pleasure to host this important event along with the OECD and the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, and grateful to all the participants and all those who have made this possible despite the difficulties the pandemic has created. Open government emphasizes a strategic partnership between the government and its citizens in the policymaking process based on the principles of transparency and accountability and the values of integrity, trust, communication, and cooperation. The government of the Republic of Korea has for many years prioritized such principles and values in public governance and implemented a variety of policy initiatives along those lines. And as Minister Park just mentioned in his speech, we have witnessed the importance of communication based on transparency and trust in our response to the COVID-19 crisis, as it enables citizens' participation and cooperation, which is so crucial in overcoming this challenge. We are confronting many social, economic, and environmental challenges in the wake of the COVID-19 pandemic, and the future of humanity is clouded by multiple uncertainties. But it's in times such as these that we can move forward and build a new foundation for better democracy, more inclusive economy, and truly sustainable development. Held in this momentous context, today's event is not only an occasion for sharing the outcomes of the research on public communication for open government that has been jointly conducted by the OECD and the Korean government for the last 2 years, but also a valuable opportunity to share wisdom and insights about the future of public communication in the post-pandemic world. In the post-pandemic era, public communication should aim to accomplish stronger government accountability in policy implementation process and public service delivery, and ultimately bring governments and citizens together in tackling the multiple challenges we face. I hope this forum will serve as a springboard for such progress. I'm especially pleased with and grateful for our partnership with the OECD and the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism. Thanks to the involvement of the ministry, I expect that we'll be able to share in-depth information about South Korea's public communication institutions, policies, and strategies, and especially its experience in the pandemic response. We'll also hear from public communication experts from governments of the United Kingdom, the Netherlands, Finland, and Malaysia, as well as from the Brookings Institution and Open Government Partnership, who will no doubt inform and enrich our deliberations and discussions today. Before closing, let me reaffirm my commitment that KDI School, in partnership with the OECD and the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, will continue to contribute to support research and other activities to promote progressive and innovative ideas in public communication, not only in South Korea, but in the wider international community. Once again, thank you very much, everyone, and I wish you a great success. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your thought-provoking words, Dr. Yoo Jong-il from KDI School of Public Policy and Management. Next, it's my honor to introduce Mr. Jeffrey Schlaugenhauf, Deputy Secretary General of the OECD. The Deputy Secretary General is now joining us from Paris and will deliver his welcome remarks online with us. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome him with a warm round of applause.
Thank you very much, Minister Park, Dr. Yu, colleagues. Good morning from Paris and good afternoon to those joining us from the Republic of Korea in the Asia-Pacific region. It is a great pleasure to open this discussion today with our co-organizers, the Korean Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism, and the Korea Development Institute. I'd like to thank you for your leadership and your collaboration in convening this important event as we continue learning from the COVID-19 pandemic and how to emerge from it stronger and better. My only regret is that I can't be with you in person today, as I very much was looking forward to being able to travel to the Republic of Korea, which has been a great and important partner and member of the OECD. At this critical time, we feel fortunate to have the opportunity to learn from and exchange with a country that has been widely recognized for its good practices in managing this crisis. The OECD's collaboration with the Republic of Korea and the Korea Development Institute on promoting open government principles predates the pandemic. Indeed, they have been key partners alongside the United Kingdom in bringing to life the first OECD International Report on Public Communication, which will be published next year. The report will present insights and recommendations on how governments can share information more effectively and enhance dialogue with citizens. As we have seen, fighting this pandemic has required everyone, citizens, businesses, governments, and civil society to do their part. The importance of such a whole of society approach has again proven the true value of the open government principles of transparency, integrity, accountability, and stakeholder participation. These principles are at the heart of the OECD recommendation of the Council on Open Government. As many parts of the world are grappling with a second wave of infections, we are here to build on lessons learned over the past months. In particular, the goal today is to reflect on how governments can provide rapid and accurate information through public communication. The delivery of clear and compelling messages has moved people to action, mitigated uncertainty, and assuaged fears. The work of public communicators has been a key element in enacting emergency measures throughout this health crisis. Their work has not been easy. Over half of the centers of government and ministries of health who took part in an OECD survey of public communicators representing nearly 50 countries ranked communicating during the crisis as a top challenge. Furthermore, communicating scientific evidence, as well as complex testing, tracking, tracing, and isolation TTI efforts requires transparency and clarity. Anything less risks damaging policy uptake and effectiveness. But we are learning, and the pandemic has demonstrated public communicators' agility and innovation in responding to the public's needs. I wish to commend those among our speakers and our audience who have been on the front lines of this huge effort, especially the members of the OECD Experts Group on Public Communication, who are contributing to the evidence and mapping of international best practices in this space. Today, with this international dialogue, we are focusing on two key areas of communication responses to COVID-19: identifying innovative practices and promoting multi-stakeholder cooperation. We recognize that communicators can no longer rely on outdated methods of one-way communication. Instead, they must take advantage of the potential presented by new technologies for engaging in two-way conversations with the public. We have to embrace innovation as an asset for dialogue, for policy delivery, and for better governance. This is about more than just using technology better. It is about renewing our thinking about what communication can be used for and what it can achieve. The pandemic has reinforced the value of taking a whole of society approach when communicating key health information on COVID-19. Take the example of the infodemic, of misinformation that has helped sow fear and has undermined trust. This has magnified the unique challenge that public communicators are facing with the coronavirus. We are therefore not surprised to see that nearly 80% of the centers of government in our survey have sought external expertise on this issue. Indeed, this proves the need for multi-stakeholder cooperation. Traditional and social media, fact checkers, researchers, and citizens have together monitored and reacted to the spread of false content, often in close collaboration with governments. For instance, since the start of the pandemic, an alliance of over 70 fact-checking organizations around the world have corrected more than 10,000 distinct pieces of misinformation. When it comes to trust, the messengers also matter. To that end, we have seen communicators leverage the voices of the scientific community, one of the most trusted actors in this pandemic, as well as the voices of public figures and influencers that can persuade harder to reach groups. Ultimately, everyone has a role to play in combating this pandemic. And the way we build these partnerships and foster a collective effort will be the key to our success. Let me conclude by saying that it is not too soon to prepare for a sustainable and inclusive recovery. The latest OECD Economic Outlook forecasts that vaccination campaigns, targeted health policies, and government's financial support can lift global GDP by 4.2% next year. The recovery would be stronger if vaccines are rolled out fast, boosting confidence and reducing uncertainty. Effective communication for and with citizens will continue to be a fundamental feature of ensuring policy successes. I therefore urge everyone joining today to think of how we can build on the lessons of this crisis to enable public communication that supports more open and effective governance. This is all about the trust of citizens and the trust of the people. This is something we cannot fail in. Thank you for the opportunity to join you today for this important discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jeffrey Schlaugenhauf, for your very powerful words there. And, well, ladies and gentlemen, please give all of our three hosts and distinguished guests a very big round of applause for their remarks. Well, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our opening session, and in a moment we will go straight into the sessions, our discussions, but please do bear with us while we make some logistical arrangements on the stage. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will begin our very first session of the Online International Conference. And our very first topic is Innovating Public Communication with Lessons Learned from the COVID-19 Pandemic. And for this, let me hand over the floor to Ms. Carlotta Alfonsi, who will be chairing this panel. And Ms. Alfonsi is an analyst focusing on open government policies at the OECD. I will leave you in her very capable hands.
Thank you very much for the introduction. I will quickly share my screen. Thank you. So it's a pleasure to open the first panel session of today's conference. In this session, we are going to discuss how the lessons from communicating during the global COVID-19 pandemic can help governments innovate how they interact with citizens and improve how public communication is used for better policy and for a more open government. I will start by presenting some of the lessons that we at the OECD have begun to gather through our data collection and our discussion with an international group of peers from our member countries and beyond. And then I'll give the floor to our excellent panel. So this presentation will be a kind of a big picture before we get into the specific examples that our speakers will give. So as per the introduction, I'm a policy analyst in the Open Government Unit of the OECD, which is where our work on public communication and media ecosystem sits. And this is because we consider communication to be an integral part of making governments more transparent, accountable, and open to citizen participation. Since the OECD Council adopted the recommendation on open government in 2017, which is the first international legal instrument in this space, we have been continuing to build evidence and to gather best practices on all of its 10 provisions. And today, this work has translated into a research project involving data collection from over 45 countries. This work will culminate, as the Deputy Secretary General just mentioned, into the OECD report that's titled Public Communication, the Global Context and the Way Forward, which will be published in 2021. I want to point out that the data in this presentation is drawn from the survey and is preliminary. It does not reflect all the responses we've received, and we're currently working on getting it cleaned and validated. So I would urge you not to please cite it outside of today's session. I want to discuss today 4 key takeaways about what the COVID-19 pandemic has taught us so far about the need to innovate how governments communicate. I will premise by saying that COVID-19 really catapulted communication to the spotlight of policy implementation. So we saw in an unprecedented way that information became the key asset through which measures were implemented and an essential way to instruct citizens on the actions to take to keep themselves and others safe. So there is an opportunity to consolidate the recognition for this key function and to capitalize on it going forward. These takeaways shown on the slide are drawn from our analysis and from discussions that we've had with the newly formed OECD expert group on public communication. And they highlight both the excellent work that has been done around the world under exceptional circumstances, and also some of the areas to focus our efforts for the future. The 4 priorities that are listed on the right here are interconnected and equally important. They relate to upskilling communication teams for the digital age, leveraging data and insights to make communication more inclusive, future-proofing the ways that governments and stakeholders fight against misinformation, and improving how governments coordinate to communicate with one voice. Let's start by looking at the human resources and skills challenge. A lot of the innovation in the communication space has been driven by new technologies affecting how people produce and consume content and the data that they generate. And this creates huge opportunities for making communication more precise and effective, but only if the teams across government have the right capacity and skill to do so. We have seen that COVID-19 has accelerated existing trends towards rapid digital-first communication and towards data-driven communication. This is a positive trend, and it was highlighted by several members in our network. But there were also points about there often being a skills gap with the most advanced tools and methods for leveraging these innovations. Our survey data seems to support this point. It appears that human resources are a significant challenge for about 3/4 of respondents to a survey. Similarly, when we looked at the qualitative responses on the professional qualifications of staff, there were very few respondents who explicitly mentioned that data analysis or digital skills were on their specifications. On top of this, we also noted that training staff internally is not necessarily too common across centers of government and ministries of health. Overall, this suggests that there could be a worthy investment in professionalizing and further expanding the capacity of communication teams. And importantly, this would be a prerequisite to actually unlocking the benefits of some of the groundbreaking innovations that are shaping this field. The second key area for innovation is very much linked to what we just discussed. It has to do with making communication inclusive for all groups in society. COVID-19 again showed the importance of reaching and winning over very different groups in society in order to get everyone to comply with emergency health measures. And this is a notable challenge. In particular, some of the practitioners in our network noted that it was difficult reaching ethnic minorities and vulnerable groups, but also sometimes persuading youth to comply with social distancing. A Reuters Institute report, interesting, also look at the increase in news avoidance and declining trust among certain segments of society, and the potential scope that this creates for dis and misinformation to settle in. Here, the key weapons at the disposal of communicators are data and insights again. These can help create more precise and tailored content and deliver it more effectively to various audiences. Behavioral insights, or BI, also played a role in developing communication around the virus. Neither data nor BI are new innovations per se, but there is room for growth in their implementation. For instance, 1/4 of the centers of government in our survey do not target any specific audience group with their communication. And well below half target youth or minorities, for example. Similarly, some of the other data shows that about only 1/4 of centers of government said they conduct audience insights at least quarterly. For behavioral insights, on the other hand, we know that behavior change is a very common goal of public communication. But this is not always grounded in a scientific and evidence-based approach. In our data, we see that about 1/3 to 40% of the respondents do not interact with behavioral experts, and only a small minority have this kind of experts on their staff. So integrating insights, both data and behavioral, into the design of communication will be a key step for making it more effective with mainstream audiences and crucially also with those harder to reach groups. Next, we're looking at how to navigate the evolving challenges to the information ecosystem. Over recent months, the infodemic has been reshaping our collective understanding of the broader phenomenon of disinformation. This was a new manifestation of disinformation to happen at such a scale and outside of the realm of electoral processes. It also stood out for the relative prominence of domestic-driven misinformation, so information that's not intentionally shared to mislead, as opposed to the types of foreign actor-led influence campaigns that we had grown used to in recent years. We saw a rapid deployment of communication responses to correct rumors and falsehoods, which the OECD analyzed in a policy brief early this year. But one important observation there was that increasingly countries see communicating proactively and transparently as a means to prevent and to combat disinformation. However, data suggests that several countries still lacked some institutionalized mechanism to combat the infodemic, or whose approaches, for example, were not fully fit for this new manifestation of the problem. About a third of the centers of government and 2/3 of the health ministries in our surveys did not have the official documents needed to guide the response to this information. And a number of them also noted that they are currently working on upgrading or introducing new formal approaches. So the takeaway is that COVID-19 might have stimulated a push for refining approaches to combat mis and disinformation. But one of the priorities for this field could actually be to make these approaches future-proof. For example, in our data, we saw that about 1/6 of the counter-disinformation approaches are grounded in national security and defense. And this applies very well to some aspects of the problem and is also likely a legacy of the types of foreign influence campaigns that have been dominant so far. But more forward-looking approaches should be able to pivot between issue areas, whether this is elections or public health, as in the case of COVID-19 and the vaccines, and then climate change and other issues that may arise that are subject to this kind of manipulation. Last but not least, crisis communication has emerged as the leading communication challenge among our survey respondents. COVID-19 has tested the ability of governments to act rapidly and cohesively during a crisis. And while we have seen and observed excellent examples of effective communication during this crisis, the common perception among the practitioners, the communicators themselves, has been that this was achieved with difficulty. In particular, the uncertain and evolving nature of the pandemic and of the policies introduced to contain it raised a sort of trade-off between the speed of the information and its accuracy and its shelf life. And this has been a tough balancing act, especially when trust and volatility of information was at stake. However, the element that stood out as the main issue in the way of effective crisis communication is coordination. Over 2/3 of the respondents in our survey identified coordination precisely as the reason why they found crisis communication to be challenging. And in particular, coordination has been further complicated by the faster digital comms, and it can also contribute to dissonant messages and information overload, which are countering the effectiveness of the crisis response. So I will conclude briefly here by saying that the present COVID-19 crisis has accelerated some of the important trends for innovating communication. But we have also seen that structural challenges like skills and coordination are important ones to overcome to really benefit and consolidate the lessons learned in these recent months. Many of these lessons can already be applied for the next big milestones of public communications, which are namely the drive for vaccinations and for mobilizing society towards an inclusive recovery. I will stop here and introduce our panel for this session, which is made up of public communication leaders from 4 countries. Mr. Hyun-Rae Jo, the Deputy Minister of Public Communication from the Republic of Korea. Mr. Eric den Hout, the Director of Public Information and Communication from the Government of the Netherlands. Ms. Beth Robbins, the Deputy Director for Strategic Communication at the UK Cabinet Office. And Ms. Maria Suleiman, Head of the Sector for Disaster, Outbreaks and Emergency from Malaysia's Ministry of Health. We will now have a presentation from each speaker and move on to questions towards the end of the session. So Mr. Jo, I will give you the floor for the first presentation. Thank you.
안녕하십니까. 저는
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am the Public Communication Officer of the Ministry of Culture, Sports, and Tourism. Now in Korea, there is now a rule that whenever there are more than 2 people, then you have to keep your mask on. So allow me to keep mine on. Now today I'd like to tell you about the public communication during the COVID-19 pandemic in Korea. Now as you can see here, President Moon of Korea, now he has emphasized openness, transparency, and democracy in our fight against COVID-19. And these are also the principles of public communication. So based on this, I have also summarized the principles of public communication as such: transparency, rapid, Ubuntu, smart, and thoughtful. So Ubuntu, now this might be unfamiliar to you. So this is actually the word from South Africa, meaning that I am because we are. So now I believe that so you see that these 5 principles make up trust, the heart of public communication. Now then, first about transparency. Now in administration, generally speaking, transparency is about disclosing information, policy information to the public in a transparent manner. But then in the case of COVID-19, for the Korean government and also for the people, so this also meant that we needed to have mutual trust. So the government held regular briefings regarding COVID-19, which was also live broadcast, and the summaries of them were delivered to the municipalities and also to the public institutions. And regarding the COVID-19, so I would say that the beginning of the regular briefing was actually the communication of COVID-19 information. And the website is also there dedicated to COVID-19, and this is where you can find all the information about COVID-19. And also the people agreed that such transparency and active disclosure of information are the basis of fight against infectious diseases. So people also complied with the government's measures. So for example, disclosing their movements, of course without violating their privacy, and also writing in the entry log. Now also, transparent communication helps people refrain from overlooking or exaggerating the dangers of COVID-19. So this, by providing the information as is to the people, we allow people to make their own decisions about the risks. And also, transparent communication induces people into choosing appropriate measures for safety based on the right information. And transparent communication makes democratic and non-coercive epidemic prevention possible by inducing the voluntary cooperation of the people. Now, the second principle was rapid. Now, there were briefings twice a day regarding COVID-19. And 75.3% of the respondents to the survey say that they trusted the briefings. Now, because of this unprecedented pandemic, it is also important for us to be flexible in our approach. Now, in the beginning of the epidemic, in the course of supplying masks, we were also able to see some disorderly conduct. So then the government came up with the rules regarding the mask. So we had rationing of the masks by the day of the week, and also we had we had also rationed the mask per individual, and as a result we were able to restore order in the supply of masks. And as we all know, since the pandemic, there was also the quick spread of false information, so much so that it is now called the infodemic, as was just explained by the moderator. Anyway, so for the current government as well, we also try to fight against such infodemic. So our approach was called the 3C: catch, classify, and conduct, meaning that we wanted to identify the misinformation and classify them, then also take actions when necessary. So now then, if I am to summarize the implications, then first is the rapid distribution of official information. And also, regarding the public's valid points of concern, the government was flexible to provide rapid feedback and make improvements. And also, as the media environment shifts towards social media and mobile formats, information is being spread faster than ever. Therefore, it is necessary to respond rapidly to unidentified information or misinformation, because it is also very easy for people to be misinformed by this kind of misinformation. And the third principle was Ubuntu. I would say that in Korea's fight against COVID-19, the one thing that stood out was the people's participatory and cooperative spirit. People were encouraging each other. They were cheering up the healthcare professionals. So, for example, the building owners would reduce their rents for the struggling self-owners or the restaurants. Then also for some people held the campaign to yield their facial masks to those who need them more. Now, the implications of this is that the volunteer practices of individuals for the greater good is a force that has helped tighten the reins of epidemic prevention despite the different hurdles. Of course, there were some campaigns like the Cheer Up Korea campaign that were led by the government. But then now, as the campaign spread and in the course of continuing the campaign, we need to have the citizens' participation, and we were able to gain such participation. So you can see that the government may serve as a catalyst, but then it is also important to encourage the spirit of sharing. And the next principle was SMART. The Korean government also tried to strengthen digital communication capabilities in order to respond to COVID-19. So we now have the Digital Communication Office under the Ministry of Sports, Culture, and Tourism. And also in other ministries, they are now establishing digital communication offices. So right now there are 31 agencies or institutions that have the digital communication office, and I'm sure that they will continue to increase. And we have also created campaign videos and also provided support for non-contact leisure activities. Some of these campaign videos include the Korea Wonderland. I'm sure that you have also seen this. And so they say that this was quite a moving video that was also quite well received in other countries as well. We also have set up the portal sites to disclose official information and also to give information about where you can get screened. And we also provided support for the rural areas as well for this digital communication as well. Now, digital communication has become even more important due to COVID-19, as we can see. I would say that the cooperation with private sector media will become possible only when the government is equipped with the necessary digital communication capabilities, and it is necessary to have a strategy for producing and spreading content that suits the characteristics of individual media format. And the last principle was thoughtful. Now, for example, for some groups, for example, the children, we thought that it would be very difficult for them to understand what exactly COVID-19 is. So we have also held online briefings for children only. And we also have had the sign language translation for the visually impaired, and also for the hearing impaired, we have provided the communication. And also, in some cases, we have provided anonymous screening. And also for some unregistered workers, we have also conducted anonymous screening and provided translation of websites as well as the briefings into English. Now, the pandemic crisis is more likely to heighten the isolation and discrimination of specific individuals or groups. So more considerate and detailed communication strategies are required. We must make sure that we have sensitive enough communication strategy to leave no one behind. So communication with a small number of people should not be considered any less important. Efforts to communicate with those with poor accessibility to information like children will enhance trust in the government's overall epidemic prevention efforts. Well, I do hope that my brief presentation was helpful in understanding Korea's public communication in COVID-19. So perhaps thanks to these efforts, over 83% of the people have had a positive assessment of the Korean government's epidemic prevention efforts. And also over 86% have responded that they have confidence in the KCDC. And a lot of people are still complying with the mask wearing and so forth. Of course, COVID-19 is still ongoing, and we need to continue our fight. And in the course of this, we must make sure that trust-based communication will also continue. So that is all for my presentation. Thank you very much for attention.
Thank you very much, Mr. Joe. It was a very great presentation that really touched upon some of the points that we raised before, especially the whole of society approach, the Ubuntu pillar that you described. That's very impressive, and I hope we have the opportunity to go more into it during the questions and answer. But without further ado, I will give the floor to Mr. Eric Den Hout for the next presentation. If you're ready, please take it away.
Thank you, Carlotta. Good day, dear colleagues. It's an honor to speak at this international event. I would like to thank the organizers, the OECD, the Korean government, and KDI School for their invitation. And I try to share my screen now. We'll see if it works. It doesn't work. But it's not a real problem because they're only for illustrations. But if the organization can start them in, it's no problem. But I start. The world has been deeply affected by a horrible virus for almost a year now. And like a burglar and sometimes an assassin, it came into our homes and disturbed our lives. It takes great effort from all of us to get the virus under control. Hopefully the vaccines about which we have been hearing positive reports in recent weeks will help to return to a normal life. But until then, restrictive measures will remain in place. Everyone is expected to behave in a non-normal way. It is understandable that people expect an important role from the governments to help or to guide them. And we have seen that almost all governments have taken up this role. Each government does this in a way that best suits the culture of the country and the opportunities that the country has. Compulsion and persuasion go hand in hand here. In my country, as in most other countries, the government has far-reaching powers to impose restrictive measures. But our government's influence is limited behind the people's front doors. That's how we organized it in the Netherlands. We are used to that and we like it. The advantage is that we can leave a lot to our citizens. But it also means that we cannot enforce everything and we must put a lot of trust in our citizens. Trust is mutual. I think everyone has faced a situation where they mistakenly trusted the other, but few of us would call themselves naive. Likewise, good government is not naive. But a good government is not extremely suspicious either. A good government likes to give confidence to its citizens. But citizens will only behave, I see it's coming. Yes, you can put on the next slide, please. But citizens will only behave as the government likes to see it if they too trust the government. In the Netherlands, citizens' trust in the government is higher than in many other countries. That is an advantage. But now that the pandemic continues, the inconveniences and problems for many people and businesses are growing. Despite the ample financial compensation, many companies are in a danger of going bankrupt. More and more children develop psychological problems because they are limited in their social context. They have to make a great sacrifice, while most of them hardly get sick themselves from the virus. The older, vulnerable people fear the virus and feel lonely. It's not always easy to encourage each other. The government still has no other message than hold on. From the beginning, our communication follows two tracks. The first track is aimed at fighting and containing the virus. In the campaigns, we use the slogan, "Only together we can cut control over corona." It consists of facts, measures, and provides our citizens with tools to avoid becoming infected and not to infect others. It's mainly about limitations, about not doing things that we were used to and that we love. But it is a necessary path to walk. The second track is that of empathy. We run the campaigns under the slogan, "Attention to each other." We call on citizens to look after each other. The focus is on social cohesion. The care people have for each other may hold the country together even more than laws and financial incentives. Our communication relies on maximum transparency. Of course, we communicate the successes and the progress we make, but we are also perfectly clear about the uncertainties we face and the mistakes we make. We are completely clear about our goals. From the outset, the health of the population was paramount. We knew people would get sick from the virus and people would die, but we wanted to guarantee a place for everyone in the hospital and in intensive care. We succeeded with the help of our good neighbor Germany. But the influx went so fast that much of the regular care came to a standstill. We were not ready for the virus. Like a Trojan horse, we had brought it in through our fellow countrymen returning from winter sports in the Alps. It was quickly spread during the traditional carnival in the Catholic south of our country. We were almost completely surprised. We were not secretive about it. The years before, the healthcare had proved to be plannable. We had created one of the most efficient healthcare systems in the world, maybe too efficient. We had no spare capacity in our hospitals to handle such a large influx of patients. Painful, but people understood. Everyone was willing to give priority to the people who needed care the most. There was a lot of solidarity in our country during the first wave in the winter and spring of 2020. And there was a lot of confidence in the measures announced by the government. Please, next slide. The focus was completely on fighting the virus. The government, citizens and companies had one common goal. Next slide, please. Gradually, we heard different voices. Understandably, some wondered if the enormous costs were proportional. Young people would inherit an enormous public debt. Many people with complaints other than COVID could not or did not dare to go to the hospital. They might become seriously ill later on. Many operations were postponed. Wouldn't we pay a high price for that in the future? We responded by showing understanding for these opposing views and did not deny that the price would get high for some. It was not just words. We started to support our companies even more generously. That helped. Most people stuck to government measures and changed their behavior. The infection rate dropped dramatically and the virus was almost gone by the beginning of the summer. Everyone longed for relaxation and the entrepreneurs wanted to do business again. We relieved the measures. It turned out to be too soon afterwards. The second wave came, as in most other countries. It would have been tempting to blame citizens, but we didn't. Only where it was clear that a group was deliberately breaking the rules did we visibly intervene. The extensive research that we have done shows that even in these difficult times, when everyone has had enough of the virus, there's still a lot of faith in the government, and people are willing to comply with the restrictions. This does not alter the fact that we are facing a major challenge in the coming period with Christmas coming on. Everyone is tired and longs to be close to their family and friends and to celebrate like other years. Next slide, please. The virus is new. This means that a lot was unclear in the beginning. Because of this, we also made mistakes, both in the policy we took and in our communication. We knew this at the beginning of the crisis, and we told our citizens accordingly. Our Prime Minister stated that we should make 100% of our decisions with only 50% knowledge of the facts. We have made mistakes. By focusing all attention on hospitals and sending all protective equipment, such as mouth masks, to them, we did not pay enough attention to the care homes. Many old people died there, without their families being able to say goodbye to them. This is a great tragedy. We had no clear policy on mouth masks. Perhaps we stressed for too long that there was no scientific evidence of its usefulness. We were afraid that it would lead to a false sense of security and that people would not keep enough distance. We have not realized enough how badly our youth suffer from the lack of social contacts and how much they have missed their schools and universities. When they started to protest, we sat down with them, and now we are working together on campaigns for young people. We made more mistakes, But we have always been transparent about everything we do and about our intentions. As a result, we have always remained close to our citizens. Government, citizens, and businesses, we are going through this crisis together. We too have to deal with a lot of misinformation and disinformation. We do not fight dissenters, but we provide everyone with facts. It is the freedom of citizens to form their own opinion. There are demonstrations against the restrictions. We allow this because the right to demonstrate is an important fundamental right, but we do not tolerate violence. We will face a major challenge in the coming period. Everyone is fed up with the virus, but we have to hold on. We will start vaccinating the population at the beginning of January. But even then, it will be a long time before we get rid of the virus. An additional problem is that many people are suspicious of the vaccines. Normally, it takes up to 10 years for a vaccine to be developed. How can it go so fast? Is it safe? Can the pharmaceutical industry be trusted? There will be no mandatory vaccination in the Netherlands. With good education, we will try to convince people to do what we think is good for them and their fellow humans. We will not force them. Next slide, please. This crisis is the biggest we have experienced since World War II. The consequences will be felt for a long time to come. At the moment, we can offer the citizens little perspective other than that we will defeat the virus together. In communication, we follow the strategy that we always follow. We are transparent about what we know and what we don't know, about what we as a government can and cannot do, about what is going well and what could be improved. And we dare to trust our citizens. We trust that the vast majority of them want to do what is good for them and for society. We help them as much as possible with good information to not only want it, but also to be able to do it. Having said this, I thank you for your attention and wish everyone a good and above all, a healthy new year. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Eric. Thank you for a very interesting presentation. And I think the transparency angle is a very important one. And I will appreciate coming back to that later in the questions. But let's give the floor now to Beth Robbins from the UK Cabinet Office. Beth, if you're ready, you may take the floor. And I believe you also have some slides.
I do. Thank you, Carlotta. And thank you for inviting the UK to participate in the session today. It's a wonderful opportunity to join the conversation and a really impressive panel. So thank you to all the speakers so far as well. As a brief introduction, as Carlotta said, I'm from the UK's Cabinet Office, but I actually work within a team that has an international focus. So whilst I'll draw briefly on some of the examples from our domestic communications operations, I'm going to focus most of my time, this brief intervention, on how we've used insight to inform our international communications. So I'll now hopefully share some slides here today. Perfect, thank you. So I wanted to start with a bit of context to the UK government's communications service and the principles that have underpinned our public communications for over 100 years. I'd like to also echo Carlotta's initial findings from the survey results today, which stress the importance of government communications for effective government and for building trust with citizens, as well as implementing effective policy, but also the need for innovation. And this slide, I think, highlights that whilst the government communication service in the UK has existed for 100 years, I think you can see that the campaigns that we've delivered during that time have certainly not stood still, and we've certainly endorsed the need for innovation throughout that time. But the key principles that I wanted to touch on that underpin our government communication service around first and foremost the need for communications to deliver the truth well told, and this really is the task that we have as government communicators. Secondly, that we take in the UK an audience-centric approach to communications. So that's centred around your audience's needs, where they are and how they need to receive information, rather than what we want to say and how we want to broadcast it. And thirdly, which is central to the presentation I'm going to give today, is around the need for all communications to be underpinned by robust insight. So the question really is, how did the Government Communications Service, with 100 years of experience of delivering effective communications, adapt to those principles to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic that we've all talked about already today? And I'll quickly just start with some very high level key learnings that I thought would be interesting to the audience today, from how we adapted the UK's domestic communications operations and structures. So we've talked a lot about the whole of society response that's required for effective communications to a crisis. And we also talk in the UK about a whole of government response, which is really required for that effective delivery of communication. And this means being able to adapt the structures that you use for delivering communications, not just the approaches. And we moved very quickly to form a central government structure that was a hub that would bring together lots of expertise from across government and cross-cutting communications expertise. The second point, again, echoing much of what we've already heard today, is the need to really evolve government's digital capabilities. And for us, this is about behaving like a media outlet, understanding how the private media sector has evolved its content and publishing strategies, and how we as government would need to do that to respond to such a rapid pace communications environment. Thirdly, we needed to create an even more rapid response and evolve our operations to respond to mis and disinformation as we were responding to, as has been titled, an infodemic. And the last point, which I'm going to come on to spend more time talking about, is then underpinning that communications with real-time data-based insight, which is not easy when we have to adapt a lot of our typical government research methodologies to be able to do that. So how do we use data-based insight to inform our international communications efforts? I'm going to talk through 3 new approaches that we took as the UK and what we learned from them, and hopefully that will give some tangible examples of some of the work that we've been doing in the UK. So the first example is that we took a quantitative view of the global news agenda. During the first month of the pandemic, global news coverage related to COVID-19 increased by over 400%. And in fact, international coverage related to the UK in that period also increased by 75%. So the volume of media content that we needed to digest and understand had radically increased, and the news cycle was in overdrive. Qualitative media analysis didn't have the speed or capacity that we needed. So we needed to look for new tools to inform our communications. AI-driven tools enabled us to track UK prominence and sentiment across 2.5 million articles from 500 global sources in real time over a 6-month period. This approach that we took generated quantitative data sets from what was ordinarily qualitative media data using natural language processing. It identified the most prominent narratives in the global media at any given time, allowing us to understand the rapidly shifting news agenda and focus critical resources and efforts on the priorities. And this would echo some of the findings again from Carlotta's research shared today, that for the majority of governments, actually resources are precious, and we need to make sure that we are directing them in the right direction and prioritizing them as necessary. Finally, it also highlighted the key channels that were driving our global audiences. And that again meant that we could inform a much more nuanced international communication strategy and using specific channels to reach specific audiences. So this new approach generated a wealth of important insight for us, as you can see, on a daily basis, but also over a period of 6 months. And it shaped our communication strategies significantly. So I wanted to touch on what we learned from this approach. We learned very quickly that despite our international communication strategy supporting the UK's international policies, it was the domestic response to the crisis that was really driving our global coverage. And that was a critical learning that we needed to be able to address. We learned also pretty quickly that the US was a critical driver of global media volume, irrespective of topic, So that's quite interesting, that not just to reach the US, but actually to reach a global audience, the US media is a very critical vehicle to do that. And maybe most interestingly, the third point was that we learned that newswires were critical nodes of reach for UK news being distributed internationally. So much so that we needed to create a dedicated newswire strategy to be able to really leverage those few hubs of reach that could then cascade our news and information and messages globally to audiences. So these are the three learnings that we found from quantifying the global news agenda and a new approach for UK international comms. Going on to the next slide, the next point, this is around the approach we took to understanding the UK's position in the world. Again, being able to respond to a very rapid moving pandemic meant that we needed to take a new approach to how we did that. We needed to use multiple information sources and analytical approaches to understand the UK's position at any time. I'm sure that many of you were familiar yourselves with the expensive and time-intensive process of undertaking global polling of citizens, or even harder, targeted audiences around the world. These typically run over months and even years and present comparative views of trends over significant time periods. But the pandemic was presenting shifts in geopolitics over days and weeks, not years, and we needed a solution. So we used new mobile tools for efficient and cost-effective collection of citizen perspectives from across the world. These tools created live dashboards of citizen perspectives and allowed us to adapt our questions on a daily and even hourly basis. We also took a deeper look at social media network analysis, using machine learning to understand the position of the UK within complex international conversations and the potential influence of those conversations within digital communities. And we've shared an example of what one of those network analysis maps could look like. I'm sure lots of you will be familiar with these, but on this slide here, just to demonstrate the complexity of the data that can be analysed by taking a machine learning and AI-driven approach. So what did we learn? Well, we learned that the UK wasn't always in the conversations that we needed to be or wanted to be, and that can sometimes be a tough lesson to learn, but a very important one. We also learned that we needed dedicated strategies to break out of our own international echo chambers and to move outside of multilateral organisations and diplomatic networks. We actually needed to significantly adapt our digital strategies to do that. We also learned that amongst the noise of COVID-19, UK institutions like the Premier League and academic institutions remained consistently prominent and often drove positive sentiment towards the UK. So they were definitely important to our international strategy. And very importantly, when we looked over the course of the pandemic, we could see two significant themes emerging that were dominant to UK international coverage. The first being vaccines, therapeutics and diagnostics, and the second being economy. And they became the forefront of the UK's international communications strategy. The third learning that I want to share today was less about quantitative approach to insight, but actually how can we learn from our peers? This was really about how we responded in rapid time to the fast pace of policy development, and how could we understand what partners and peers were doing globally that we could learn from. So we frequently turn to other nations for examples of best practice and inevitably of learnings and challenges too, to inform our domestic strategies. In the environment where new regulations and guidelines needed to be communicated on a daily basis, we looked at international practices on messages, channels, and creative concepts for communicating with our citizens. What did we learn from this process? Well, we were working at rapid pace and we often had to use manual desk research to take this approach, and just Googling what's happening in other countries, what can we see our partners are doing, what heads of states are saying. But we did create over 20 papers in the first 10 weeks of the pandemic. So we certainly did a lot of work and we learned a lot. Often this was very specific insight about new areas of policy and language that were being used, but I've tried to identify 3 high-level findings that I thought could be relevant more broadly today. So firstly, the most successful public guidance has been very, very simple. And that seems incredibly obvious, but as I think we've seen where governments have sort of struggled with communicating during the pandemic, these are complex messages, and actually this is one of the hardest challenges. So one of the examples that we often related back to was Japan's very successful 3 Cs, emerged early in the summer of the pandemic. We also found that New Zealand regularly appeared in our comparisons as examples of successful communications, and we certainly in the UK enjoyed a lot of Premier Ardern's speeches, including her Easter message, which was a very innovative approach to reaching a new youth audience. And lastly, we found that most international COVID-19 apps have experienced challenges, which again seems very obvious when we say it now, but really understanding the complexity of those challenges that different countries have faced was significant value to the UK when we came to also manage our own communications and launch of those apps. So hopefully I've kept within time, as I'm conscious there's lots to hear from other people, but thank you very much for your time. That's the end of the presentation from the UK.
Thanks a lot, Beth. And that was very fascinating, excellent learnings there. And I also, to the point about peer learning, that's very much how the OECD approach is grounded in collective learning and the sharing of best practices. And I want to thank the UK as well as as our co-hosts for this conference, the KDI and the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, for their support specifically for the OECD's work in this area. So we can now move to the final presentation for this session by Dr. Maria Suleiman, and then we'll have some time for the Q&A, where I think a lot of interesting insights will come out.
Okay, I'll share my slides. Okay, share.
Dr. Suleiman, if you have the floor.
Share. Share. Okay, so a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Dr. Maria Sulaiman from Ministry of Health, Malaysia. First of all, I would like to thank the organizers for inviting me to share my presentation. They are Korea Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Organization Economics and Cooperation Development, Korea Development Institute, School of Public Policy and Management. The topic of my presentation is Ministry of Health Malaysia experience in risk communication during this COVID-19 pandemic. The first 3 confirmed cases COVID-19 in Malaysia were reported on the 25th of January 2020. As of today, we have experienced 3 waves of COVID-19 infection. The first wave was on the 25th of January until 15th of February, involving 22 cases, which were 12 had a travel history to affected countries, 8 cases were close contacts, and 2 were from a humanitarian mission. The second wave began on the 27th of February 2020. We identified our largest cluster on the 11th of March 2020, linked to a mass religious gathering. This cluster led to a massive increase in local cases and exportation to several neighboring countries. The third wave was from the 20th of September 2020, started with cases spread locally among the prisoners and foreign workers. And this wave is still ongoing. In managing pandemic COVID-19, MOH Malaysia adopted six key strategic approach. They are public health interventions, diagnostic testing, movement control order, evidence-based approach and WHO guidelines, risk communication, and isolation and treatment. These strategic approach are interrelated, complementary, and synergistic to one another. One of the key facilitators for the whole of government approach is the leadership provided by the National Security Council, NSE, headed by the Prime Minister of Malaysia. The NSE is an agency under the Prime Minister's Department and is the lead agency coordinating Malaysia's response to COVID-19 pandemic. In this pandemic of COVID-19, as I mentioned earlier, the National Security Council under the Prime Minister Department coordinates overall response involving relevant ministries, and agencies. Ministry of Health Malaysia collaborates with Ministry of Communications and Multimedia and Department of Information to ensure information dissemination is well coordinated and accurate. At MOH Malaysia, the risk communications is managed by Crisis Preparedness and Response Center, CPRC, Corporate Communication Unit, CCU, Health Education Division, and Institute for Behavioral Research, IHBR. The risk communication main aims is to build trust amongst public, to ensure public getting the message from a credible source and timely manner, and to allay anxiety as well as to acknowledge the uncertainties. The risk communication specific objectives are to help disseminate risk communication information, to reduce tension and anxiety of the people, to assist and support the Ministry of Health's efforts in disseminating authentic and accurate information, and to increase access to authentic and accurate information to the public. MOH Malaysia has outlined 8 risk communication strategies, which include risk communication plan, information from a credible source, acknowledge uncertainty, communicating the risk to all stakeholders, including the event affected and vulnerable population, collaborate with international organizations and neighboring countries, community mobilization and engagement and empowerment, advocacy and networking with stakeholders, and avoid excessive reassurance. The MOH risk communication plan is transparent, factual, and consistent. We also deliver a daily press statements and weekly press briefing. Information is delivered in various information channels, and we also have a dedicated call center for hotlines, emails, WhatsApp for COVID-19. MOH also has a dedicated websites and portals, and our health education anniversary enhance its capacity. We also advocate in community engagement, and fake news are managed in timely manners, and behavioral studies is conducted periodically. The risk communications teams are divided according to the tasks given. They are hotlines, emails, and WhatsApp, sentiment analysis, press statement, conference, infographic video, education and engagement, and also behavioral research. The risk communication teams manage the daily issues such from the emails, hotlines, and WhatsApp application. We have a dedicated telephone lines, emails, and WhatsApps to receive COVID-19 inquiries from the general population. And as of 17 December 2020, a total of 313,352 inquiries received from the general population through the telephones, emails, and WhatsApp. MOH Malaysia also have a good collaboration with private entity to manage the risk communication, namely TM1 for telephones and InfoBip for managing the WhatsApps. MOH Malaysia communicates the risk to all stakeholders, including the event affected and vulnerable population. The press statement and press conference is prepared by a dedicated team, and press statement is issued daily while the press conference is conducted regularly. The MOH Malaysia spokesperson is only the Director General of Health Malaysia. The corporate communication units and health education division help to repackage risk communication into infographic or suitable multimedia formats, and these are used for local communication at the site of event. The risk communication is spread using the mainstream of media, social media, and messaging platform. The social media that usually used are Facebook, Twitter, emails, YouTube, Instagram, while the mobile messaging used are Telegram, WhatsApp, and also our Director General of Health News Flash. We also work closely with social media health practitioners and NGO for a better spread of risk communication. We also use crowd-searching approach for rumor surveillance from social media and mobile messaging platform, as well as from ground staff, NGOs, influencers, and journalists. And we do sentiment analysis from the messaging platform. Issues are addressed based on the response through press conference, press statement, infographic videos uploaded to the MOH Malaysia official websites and social media. From the sentiment analysis, information of fake news are denied open verification. MOH Malaysia, through the governments of Malaysia, had developed MySejahtera, which is a digital health passport for COVID-19 status. It is also a platform for risk communication, which allows users to get updated information on COVID-19, as well as health education and health promotion. The next strategic plan is the community empowerment and engagement through Healthy Community Builds a Nation, or COSPAN. The Ministry of Health engaged and empowered the community to focus on 4 scopes. They are to prevent and teach the community with the new norms of life, which are to wear masks, advocate physical distancing, and frequent hand wash, and also to practice the new norms to prevent infection, to obey all the new standard operating procedures, and also to monitor the health status of individual, family, and community. The risk communication plan includes behavioral studies on COVID-19. During this pandemic, the Institute for Health Behavioral Research, NIH, had conducted 8 studies related to behaviors. Some of the findings of the research are the overall awareness and knowledge level regarding COVID-19 in terms of general facts, signs, and symptoms, positive attitude towards COVID-19 prevention practice, whereby public believe it is significant to practice the prevention measures to contain the spread, and high intention level and self-reported practice of COVID-19 preventive measures such as hand hygiene, social distancing, and wearing masks. What had we learned? The best practice of risk communication by MOH Malaysia are the MOH Malaysia is transparent, factual, and consistent with sharing of information through press conference and press statement. We also engage and empower the community through Healthy Community Builds a Nation with advocating of the new norms. We also have a good interministerial coordination under the purview of National Security Councils. MySejahtera, a digital health passport for COVID-19 status, provide updated information of COVID-19. We also have many challenges that include the new pandemic. This COVID-19 is a new pandemic with minimal information about the disease, which had caused panic among the population at the very beginning. And the population are hesitant to adopt the new norms. At this moment, no definite vaccine yet, and this COVID-19 is infectious in nature, which spread rapidly currently. And social media, viral of unverified information, is fake news is quite rampant, also cause panic among the population. And in conclusion, Managing risk communication during COVID-19 pandemic was rather challenging with unknown etiology at the beginning. The whole of government and society approach works together and made a substantial contribution to risk communication of COVID-19. We are giving priority on strategic and risk communication to the public in order to promote and achieve positive behavioral change of the population, as well as to encourage them to adopt the new norms of daily activities. Before I end my presentation, once again, I would like to acknowledge my sincere thanks to the Korea Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism, Organization Economics and Cooperation Development, and Korean Development Institute. With this, thank you for listening to my presentation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. It was a very comprehensive picture, and it really shows the amount of work and the very detailed nature of everything that goes into responding to this pandemic. And what's not shown here is the pace at which everything happened. And normally, from my past in the communication sector, I know how long it takes to prepare to deal with these situations and to really prepare thorough communication. And it's very impressive to see the brilliant work that's been done virtually overnight. So thank you very much. And I would like to move now to the questions part of the session. I'm conscious that we're a bit over time with the presentations, but it was very good to get to hear the thoroughness of these presentations. I would want to make sure that we have enough time for at least a question from each of you. And there are some that have been submitted in advance from the public through the conference website. So I will be starting with putting a question to Eric that has to do with the role of data in developing and implementing impactful communication. So if you could share kindly, Eric, your experience with the and the kind of insights and analytics your team leveraged during the pandemic, and kindly try to keep your answers also concise so that we can make time for everyone to have a round of answers.
Sure, thank you, Carlotta. Well, you've noticed that in my presentation I was not all too technical, and I emphasized two things, and it was trust and transparency, and that's important. And for us in the Netherlands, we are quite a country. We are well, some say that we are anarchists deep down inside. So it's good to understand that you see a lot of similarities in these presentations, but there are also differences. So we can only rely on the trust of the citizens, the trust the citizens have in the government. And on the other hand, we have to trust the citizens too. And for this, the data is very, very important, because people in the Netherlands, they will only behave in a certain way if they understand why. Why should they do it? They want to see facts. So this is an advantage. Also, this is a disadvantage because there are a lot of uncertainties, but all the data we have, we use, and we present them. We are completely transparent about it, so everybody can check. And you can make a division in two types of data. We have data on the virus itself, so we are very precise about it. We made a dashboard, so you can see every day. You can see on the municipality level from how the virus is going, the hospitalization, the number of infections, and so on. So everybody can see by itself. And there are also other indices we use, like for example the sewage, the clearing, and so on. So everybody can see, but that is from the point of the virus itself. Even more important is communication, because we use, of course, the data for our policy, but sometimes we see that the policy is too complicated to communicate. And we understand completely that it will only work a policy if it's completely clear if to the public. And what we do, we use focus group, we use we do research on the effectiveness of our campaigns. We do card sorting, how our website is organized. We do social media monitoring, and it's a common goal is, do people understand? Do people understand what we mean? And we saw, for example, that we made big mistakes because all the people who do the communication and policy making are highly educated people. And we saw from our research that the language we used was far too complicated. So now we use very simple language. We use far more visuals so that people can understand far more easily. We use the insight of behavioral insight team, because what we see is that people want to comply and with the measures and restrictions, but what they really need is how to do it. So they want to know from us, how can we comply? And for that we use this research. So I must say, data has always been very important for us in communication, but it has become even more communicated. We can't do without it, and now everybody understood, even our policy masters, our politicians, they understand that communication must be based on data.
Absolutely, thank you, and I think that really resonates with the other presentations and some of the data that we have collected, and it would be great to collect these practices on the use of data, because it really makes a difference to making communication into an evidence-based policy tool in a way that is used in other dimensions of policy making and policy delivery. So thanks a lot for that. And we can move on to a question that we received for Maria Soliman. And Maria, we heard very well about how your team mobilized to communicate during the pandemic. And the question is here more about understanding how communication contributed to your country's response. If you can tell us about the role it played in the response to the virus in a more general context. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. Risk communication indeed contribute a major response to COVID-19 strategic approach in Malaysia. Risk communication help to disseminate information to the population to reduce the tension and anxiety. We also give transparent, factual, and consistent information through our social media and mobile messaging. Yes, it was very challenging with all new update daily. However, Ministry of Malaysia tried to give as accurate information as possible to the population. Thank you.
Thanks a lot. And we have now a question for Beth, which is about what you did differently during the pandemic to face up to this challenge than you had in previous crises.
Yeah, thank you, Carlotta. So I've already talked about how we used data-based insight differently to inform our international communications. And I wanted to expand on a couple of the new approaches we took in our domestic communications structures and organizations. So the first was, as I touched on earlier, was around how we took a whole of government communications approach. And this really was quite a significant undertaking for the UK, because we very quickly created a new communication structure at the centre of government. So within the Cabinet Office, we created the COVID-19 Communications Hub. And that structure has been incredibly beneficial to our rapid response to the crisis, being able to bring together cross-cutting communications experts from around government, so that being digital, strategic communications, marketing, media, etc., but also bringing people in from different agencies. So having experience from our digital culture, music, sports ministry, from obviously our health ministries, etc., into one central space. In addition to that, we also brought in our external partners, so the agencies that we work with, who are critical to being able to turn around big scale, high value communications campaigns that would really reach our domestic audiences at pace. So we had a daily battle rhythm, leadership meetings that were focused around insight and polling to make sure that we understood the environment on that day, and again, prioritised our efforts. And then very quickly, the second point, conscious of time, was just to expand on the new approach we took to behaving like a media outlet, because digital has been such a core feature of the discussions today. So in such a fast-paced environment, we knew that we would need to adapt. And a really crucial part of this for us was the virtual press conference system. So this is the first time that any government took the digital approach to streaming our media conferences, our Prime Minister's press conferences. We were able to stream directly from Downing Street with multiple cameras, remote questions from journalists, and the introduction of a live feed for British Sign Language interpretation as well, for that point around inclusion. And we were able to stream that across Twitter, Facebook, and LinkedIn, which generated over 1 million views for many of the live streams. And that made it the second most viewed published content of the press conference, behind BBC News, but ahead of Sky News. And I think that's really important to understand, that what we were aiming to do is have as much reach as those key media outlets and ensure that the government's message is going directly to those who need to understand the latest information. So that's an approach that will be used by government and by Downing Street for years to come, as a very new approach we took to digital content publishing. Thanks, Carlotta.
Thanks a lot. That's great, and it's very interesting to hear about how you were able to mobilize all of these resources and channel them into this new effort at very short notice. And I think your presentation as well highlighted that there's a lot of new work that went into this that wouldn't have been possible if the resources weren't there. So that's an excellent takeaway from this. I am being told by the team that we have a question from the floor from the conference hall in Seoul.
Yes, we do, I believe. We have some time for questions from our guests here today in Seoul. So if you have a question, please raise your hand, and a member of our wonderful staff here will pass the microphone to you. Should we go with ladies first? The lady in the third row of the conference room. If you could state your name, your organisation, and please let us know who you're addressing the question to as well.
Hi, my name is Ha-young from KDI School. Thank you everyone for your participation today, and I would like to address a question to Mr. Jo from the Ministry of Culture and Sports and Tourism in Korean, if you may. 감사합니다. 오늘
Thank you very much for the presentation today. Now, as was emphasized in the OECD presentation, I believe that for the communication, now human resources are the prerequisite of innovating public communication and making it more effective. So what is the Korean government doing in order to develop the human resources for the public communication? Well then, regarding the communication now, because of information delivery, so I would say that the communicator standing between the government and the people, their capabilities would be very important. So then how we can strengthen the capabilities of the communicators. Of course, we also talked about the communication being data-based. Of course, that is very important. And also, we need to be capable of reading and understanding the data as well. So then at my ministry, we are actually providing a lot of training for the civil servants. So not just for in theories, but also the cases and also the media trends and also the trends in the public opinion. So we also provide this kind of communication training on how to read and understand the data. And also we give them training about how to provide briefing or presentation, so the presentation know-how as well. And so we have the digital communication office, but also we have the spokesperson per ministry, and we also have training for the spokespeople as well of the different ministries. And also for the policymakers, to be provided with the right information. We also analyze the news articles and the news on a regular basis. And of course, there are other things as well, but then now my ministry and also the OECD and the KDI school, so the three of us together will be providing a training that is based on problem-solving skills. So not just in classroom format, but problem-solving format of training to be provided starting next year. But I believe that, yes, this is something that we need to work on a continuous basis.
That answered your question. And I believe we had one more question from the floor. We will get to our gentleman there in the third row to the right side of the room. If you could pose your question and let us know who it's addressed to, as well as stating your name and association.
Okay, thank you very much. I want to appreciate the organizers of this conference. My name is Declan from KDI School. So I believe that the channel of public communication is dependent on the structure of a country. Korea and other advanced countries have made use of digital technology to achieve effective communication because of the peculiarities of these countries. But we look at countries in Africa, like for example, my country, Nigeria, we have 60% of the population who are illiterate. They cannot read, neither can they write. So we have just 40% internet penetration. So, and this makes the use of digital technology not ideal, not totally ideal. And we also have, it's a heterogeneous country. So, taking all these things into consideration, what do you think should be the best, channel or strategy for public communication? And my second question is related to trust, because effective public communication cannot be possible without trust. So how can government engender trust? How can government build trust from the populace? Thank you.
Could you clarify who that question was addressed to, please?
Okay, it's an open question, really. So I think any of the panelists can attend to it.
Then perhaps we could hear from Maria Suleiman from the Ministry of Health of Malaysia, how to build trust at this time of confusion and perhaps a high level of distrust.
Ministry of Health Malaysia did encounter such questions from the public. We have to respond rapidly to any inquiries from the public, as well as in terms of rapid information or clarification from the population. And we have to deliver it as fast as possible to alleviate their fears, anxiety amongst the population. And in response to that, we use all means of social media as well as messaging platform to deliver our information. And in Malaysia, we are actively using the social media such as Facebook, Telegrams, which are updated regularly. Any information, including data, we will give to share it with the public, with the population. And with that, we hope that it do help to give more information to alleviate the fear among the population. Thank you.
Thank you. And I believe we had a question from the press, the lady in the green silky shirt.
Hi, I'm a reporter from Arirang TV, and my name is Kim Yan-sung. This question goes out to Beth Robbins. I was wondering what you find notable about South Korea's response in public communication, and how, compared to your own country's response, how South Korea's response could be improved. Thank you.
So the question was posed to Ms. Robbins in the UK.
Yeah, thank you so much. I have to confess I don't know in detail the nuances of South Korea's specific communications response, and I definitely don't feel qualified to make an assessment of other governments' responses to the crisis. So I think it's probably better that I focus on, I think, some of the areas that we certainly feel like in the UK we would want to continue to be evolving our offer and the work that we do. And I think also touching on the previous question as well and bringing these together around the importance of channels. And I think that we talked today about the new innovative approaches that we've taken to using insight to inform our communication strategies. But that absolutely isn't a kind of fixed known, and we have to continue to do that, and we have to innovate. And the importance is to continue to understand where our audiences are and how they are digesting their information. So I've definitely talked a lot about digital, but I think it's a very fair challenge, not just for other countries in the world, but for the UK as well, to understand that that isn't the only means to reach your audiences, and to really make sure that you have an inclusive response to the crisis. You will need to continue to do that insight. And an example, I think we did this well in the crisis in the UK, was we actually deployed a significant campaign with our national newspapers to make sure that the key messages were being reached. And that did have significant influence and was very successful. But we took a very different tact when then looking at specific localized audiences. So I'm sorry that I haven't really directly been able to answer your question today. I think it's a difficult one for me to be able to, obviously we'd welcome a conversation with anyone in more detail about what we've learned and what we could share as learnings with specific countries. But I think that would touch on two of the last questions there about what we would continue to want to do well is definitely a focus on channels and understanding where your audiences are. So I hope that's at least an interesting answer, a slightly tangential one. Thank you.
Well, I do think that is a very interesting question, and if we could perhaps hear from Mr. Den Hoet, that would perhaps we could have your thoughts on this, what you found maybe particularly notable about South Korea's response to the pandemic, the public messaging.
Sorry, can you be a bit more specific on the question, what you want to hear from me?
What you maybe perhaps found notable about South Korea's response to the government's public communication. South Korea's public communication from the government. If we could hear your response to that, please.
Well, I still don't still get the word. Maybe Carlotta, can you help me, because.
Yes, I think so. The question that that the journalist had asked was about feedback or impressions on South Korea's public communications during, and I think very much like Beth, perhaps other countries have gotten secondhand information about what was going on in Korea. Obviously, also because of the language. Yeah. I would say perhaps this is a very tricky question to answer for Eric and for our speakers. Yeah. But I think everyone in general was quite impressed and learned a lot from just the success that Korea had in managing the spread of the virus at various stages. And I think that that is something that a lot of ourselves are asking. A lot of us are asking ourselves. How Korea managed to achieve that, and you know, Eric, if that's
yes, thank you. Yes, of course, it's secondhand, but it's absolutely clear that in our newspapers and on television, South Korea was one of the big success states. We have the general impression that you handled it very, very, very well. Not only on the measures you take, the restrictions, but also on communication. So so it's very interesting to hear more in detail today from how you did it. But absolutely, we think that you did very well in South Korea. Absolutely.
Right, well, thank you very much. And I believe we're out of time, so we're going to have to wrap up the Q&A session here. But thank you, everybody, so much for participating. And a special thank you to Ms. Carlotta Alfonsi for really doing a wonderful job of leading us throughout this session. And, of course, our invited speakers, Mr. Choyonle, Mr. Eric Den Hoet, Ms. Beth Robbins, and Ms. Maria Suleiman. Thank you so much. We benefited so much from your insights. We are going to take a very short break, and we will be back in 5 minutes. And please take this time to enjoy the refreshments and the coffee provided for you at your seat. And we will see you. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let us resume our online conference. Let us start our second session, which is all about engaging with stakeholders for a more resilient response. So to lead us through this discussion is Mr. Craig Matasek. He is a policy analyst of the OECD, focusing on open government, media, and cities. So the floor is all yours.
Excellent. Thank you very much. My name is Craig Matasek, as she said, and I'm a policy analyst on the Open Government team at the OECD, and I'm very pleased to be here virtually with all of you today. As we heard in the first session and the opening remarks, public communication has a critical role to play in helping ensure a whole of government, whole of society response to the pandemic. And thinking about the word public in public communication brings us to this session, which is focused on engaging with stakeholders for more resilient response to the challenges of COVID-19 and the recovery. The pandemic has highlighted the need for governments to engage with citizens in order to share information, understand their needs and concerns, and rapidly changing health and economic context, which we heard a lot about in the previous session, which I think really highlighted the issues and challenges as well, but also the need for citizens and governments to engage to counteract false information. So as was mentioned already today, the infodemic around COVID-19 has pointed to the vulnerability of media and information ecosystems, as well as to the role of governments and the public more widely in safeguarding the free flow of information. So today's conversation, I'm looking forward to it as it will focus on the ways that governments can partner with key actors to enable more effective communication that supports the open government principles of transparency, integrity, accountability, and stakeholder participation. Before getting to the presentations though, let me introduce the panel. First, we have Katju Holkeri, who's the head of the Governance Policy Unit in the Public Governance Department of Finland's Ministry of Finance. Here she focuses on open governance policy, civil service legislation, knowledge management, and a number of other topics. I should also note that she's the current chair of the OECD's Working Party on Open Government. So she's well acquainted with the OECD's work on these topics and is a really valuable voice on these matters. So we thank her for being here and for sharing Finland's examples. Second, let me welcome Taejun Lee, who's Associate Professor at the KDI School of Public Policy and Management. Here, Dr. Lee oversees the Open Government and Innovation Lab. He's also been very supportive of the OECD's work on the role of public communication as a tool to promote open government, and we valued our interactions with him greatly. Following the two live presentations, we'll have two interventions via pre-recorded videos as the participants were not able to join us live due to the time difference. First, KDI has facilitated the intervention for Mr. Daryl West, who's a Vice President of Governance Studies and a Senior Fellow at the Center for Technology Innovation at the Brookings Institution. Mr. West's current research focuses on American politics, technology policy, and artificial intelligence. And last, but certainly not least, we will hear from Sanjay Pradhan, the CEO of the Open Government Partnership. The OGP is an essential voice in the field globally, and I know that we have greatly valued our collaboration with the OGP over the years in promoting open government principles. So finally, let me just say that we're excited to have our speakers here and to benefit from their insights and experiences. So we'll do a round of presentations, followed by some questions at the end of the session. So with that said, let me turn to Katju for the first intervention.
Thank you so much. And thank you for the Korean government, KDI and OECD for this marvelous possibility to be here today. I'm really honored and privileged to have this possibility. I will try to share my slides as well with you. We'll see. Oops, yes. So actually, I will be talking specifically about one example of our government communication and the Finnish national dialogues during COVID-19. But I also wanted to, before I go to that specific example, I wanted to give you some of the context from Finland. And I work, like was introduced, a lot with open government work in Finland. And we have public communication as one of the 8 areas of open government work. So it is really at the core of our open government work. But it is also vice versa. So we have the principles of government communication in Finland And openness is really the foundation of these principles of our communication. So the principles include openness, trust, fairness, easy to understand, interaction, and service orientation. And these are the values in our government communication that guide the communication in the daily work. And of course, also, and very much so, during the pandemic. If you take, for instance, easy to understand was already mentioned by Netherlands, is very, very important during the pandemic. And for us, communication is, of course, part of the daily strategic work. You have to lead it, manage, plan, evaluate, and develop. That's probably obvious, but also, of course, important in times like COVID, but also in normal circumstances, that our communication responds to change and also responds to the expectations that we have or that are in the society. Just a little couple of comments or glances at what the government communication during COVID, some issues, because these are related also to the Finnish national dialogues. Very important has been, and this has also come up in the earlier presentations, that there are very special needs for special groups. For instance, in Finland, we are a bilingual country, but we have also very many other language groups. And this is very important that we have the communication for these language groups. But there is also studies in Finland that 14% of Finnish people actually need what is called plain language. So a simpler version of the Finnish language or the Swedish language, which is our other language. And this is really, really important that we are able to provide information in plain language. And of course, then very much also on the focus in government communication during other specific age groups like children and elderly. And just have taken one example here that we have tried also to reach different groups by, for instance, enlisting social influencers in the fight against COVID to spread the government or to spread the communication. So we have sent advice to the bloggers, rappers, and writers so that they could reach those people who are not reached by traditional media. These are just some glances. Then we have, of course, it's very important to know from citizens, how are we doing? And there is once the COVID crisis started, what we call Citizen Pulse was initiated or introduced, and that is a monthly questions to a sample of Finnish citizens. And there's a lot of other questions as well, but there are questions about information, of course. Did you get information? How trustworthy do you think the information has been? And how has the information from government affected your sense of security? So these are among the questions that we ask from the citizens about the information they've got, where did they get it, and how trustworthy and how they were affected. This is, I don't want to, this is absolutely a very, very important thing, but still it is what we could call a tick the box exercise. So the citizens, they say, yes, I got, no, I didn't, or something in between, or it's just a multiple choice questions. But we also wanted to hear the true feelings and how the citizens are coping with the COVID crisis. We think one very important part of communication is also listening and dialoguing. And therefore, very quickly, Finland was hit somewhere mid-March with the pandemic. And very quickly, we realized that we need to have something more than these questionnaires to the citizens. And we organized very quickly. I come from the Ministry of Finance, like was said in the beginning. And together, the Ministry of Finance with a Dialogue Academy, which is a civil society organization or an organization, and Time Out Foundation, which is a foundation that was built up by the Finnish Innovation Fund, Sitra. We three got together and decided that we will start what we called them Finnish lockdown dialogues, but there's no actual lockdown anymore, so we've renamed them Finnish national dialogues. And we decided that we are going to get other organizations, other people to join us in organizing these dialogues. So in the end, we got a lot of other organizations. They were all together during the springtime. There were 80 organizations or actors. There were civil society organizations, there were municipalities, there were government offices, there were foundations, there were individual citizens organizing these dialogues. All of the organizers got training from us. We used a specific dialogue method, which is called timeout dialogue. And they got, these organizers got training to facilitate these dialogues. Because these dialogues, of course, due to the situation, were all virtual. And the method of the dialogues is that there is actually kind of about 10 people in each discussion. There is a facilitator, but there's also a person who takes notes. And there are two questions asked from the participants. The first question is, what are they worried about in this situation? And the other question was, what are they confident about in this situation? And then they spend 1.5 hours listening to each other, telling about their feelings, their experiences. So it's really very much kind of based on how they are feeling and listening to each other and commenting, and also then kind of increasing the joint understanding of each other's of the dialogue. We paid particular attention when we kind of invited and asked the organizations and foundations and civil society organizations to join us as organizers of these dialogues, that we could get those minorities, those more vulnerable groups in the society whose voices are not heard as well. And through this partnership with these 80 different organizers, we were able to reach groups like prisoners, sex workers, relatives of mental health patients, then of course teachers, social workers, children, elderly, pensioners, a lot of different kinds of groups. All together during the springtime, we had 162 dialogues, and these are continuing now. And during the springtime, we had over 1,100 participants in these dialogues, speaking with us for 1.5 or 2 hours. And like I said, these were all documented. So there was these notes don't say who said what, but they document and note what was said in these dialogues. And the idea is that we could get these resumes from the dialogues. There was a dialogue day every other week, a day when these organizers organized these dialogues. And then we made a resume out of these resumes and published that on our website. So it's publicly available what was discussed in these dialogues during that particular day, and then the next day and so forth. And all these are on our website still. But besides these being on the website and for anybody to read, these were also used by the government and by the municipalities. So we used this kind of a picture of what is the feeling of Finnish citizens during the springtime. First kind of alarm, then maybe going towards the summer, towards more hope and more freedom. And then now again, maybe a little bit darker thoughts, maybe the vaccine giving some hope again, but there are different kinds of feelings. And we use these for the exit strategy of Finland for the COVID-19, for instance, for the resilience work that we were doing during the summer. And most recently, we are publishing today our open government strategy. And these dialogues have kind of been one very important part of that. And we also feel that these dialogues are a way to build the trust in the nation's ability kind of to steer through the crisis, because we feel that you will be treated like you treat others, that trust is a two-way street. And if people see that the Ministry of Finance, all these different organizations are willing to hear you and listen to you and actually use the information, what you're telling about your feelings and the situation, how you're coping it with, that is a way to increase trust. We don't have any yet, this is being studied, so we don't have any particular evidence about this, but we have one example of success, which we think is an example of the trust in the Finnish society, that we are a country with 5.5 million inhabitants and 2.5 million downloads of the Corona mobile app. So this is kind of just one glance. So I just wanted to take these dialogues as an example of how you can also, together with different partners, a very kind of co-operational effort, how you can dialogue and reach the citizens, and in that way also maybe get more trust and basis for the public communication in these challenging times. So thank you very much, and really it has been a great pleasure to be part of this conference. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, Katju. The examples of ensuring that your messages are well targeted is useful, but the efforts to get the pulse of the citizens and to go beyond the ticking the box exercise is really, I think, inspiring. And we've talked together, but all, in the OECD and with our partners as well, about the importance of not just sharing information, but also of promoting dialogue and conversation between governments and citizens. And I think that's especially important. Or I think COVID probably has highlighted the importance of that in a fast-changing and delicate situation. And so I think these examples of the dialogues are really useful. So we really thank you very much for your presentation. I also think the link with trust is it's important that you highlight that, because at the end of the day, when we talk about the open government principles, when we talk about conversation, information sharing, dialogue, it really does come back to that, because that's that's a really fundamental issue that is, again, COVID has highlighted the threats to that and what happens when you don't have that trust. So thank you. Next, let me turn to Taijun Lee for his presentation.
Social coalition and solidarity in South Korea is quite important to public governance and open government in general, as well as in response to COVID-19. As actually the public communication in South Korea has been a major innovation platform to support public participation and democratic participation and collaborative governance between the state and the public. So I'm here to present some of the findings and implications surrounding Korean society by taking examples and cases and even successful policies, the turning in Korean society and citizens and the government officials and the media and other stakeholders involved in policy process and crisis management into main actors for making social capital and trust in government, as well as innovation policy outcomes during the COVID-19. So basically, the South Korea, the public communication service and the policies empower Korean society to flatten the curve of COVID-19 and cultivate the very values and open government principles and the system composed of the transparency, accountability, citizen engagement, and trust in government. For this, public communication is very useful and very meaningful and very crucial to implementation and design and open government policies and implementation in South Korea. Some years ago, KDI and OECD worked together to produce these findings by incorporating OECD trust in government framework. At the time, we analyzed the national population and the data set. As you can see from this slide, the Korean citizens, they're very concerned and very excited, they're willing to see how government is cooperating with citizens and stakeholders involved in the open government ecosystem and the policy process. The experience with a government institution quite important, and ability of civil servants to innovate, fairness and effectiveness disaster risk management and governance, and available information for decision making and ruling in public society. Based on these findings and the recommendations, and the Korean government is making embedded strategies of making public values and open government principles in the 3 different public innovation strategy in government sector. As you can see from this slide, this is well-being, quality of life, the indicators from OECD at a Better Life Index. As you can see, the Korean government adopt a whole of government approach to promote the citizen engagement and participation and collaboration. But the Better Life Index shows that Korea shows a downward trend from 2018 to 2019. But the corruption indicator, anti-corruption indicator, Transparency International, shows in a very important the findings. The findings are rather the encouraging in the Korean society and the government innovation, the likely to see increase in national perception of anti-corruption. So we are improving and we are making progress at anti-corruption. Last thing is trust in government. Trust in government is on the rise and will be intensified and more ever after the COVID-19 crisis. So the well-being indicator and the trust in government and anti-corruption are the core and the basic pillars of making good governance and better the innovation in government sector. Next is the Korean and the government is making an effort, huge effort to listen very carefully to the citizens' voices and the requests and recommendations as a collective wisdom, rather than top-down and a bureaucratic and closed policy decision-making in a system. The findings and statistics shows how government is listening to the public ideas and how to incorporate public ideas and intelligence into policy making for open government and a better government and good governance. The slide shows that the public communication is quite important too, well-being and social value creation in South Korea and the government innovation, and then especially in a participatory and collaborative governance, the support of the public communication. This slide shows more examples and cases where the public communications make a strong impact and the significant contributions to the maintenance of the social capital and better life as a well-being and trust in government in South Korea. We can take a look at several cases and of areas of focus where public communication has been able to help the government organizations innovate themselves and open up more government for Korean society and Korean the people. Let me summarize the key examples and cases and how to use the strategic public communication to tackle the COVID-19 in South Korea. As you might know, so we are producing good cases and practices of the strategic public communication in response to the COVID-19, use of digital channels and contents that related to COVID-19, citizen participation using public data and the Corona map, electronic entry list and using QR code, the patient and the contact management using the care services, and the COVID-19 micro page, the public participation, the campaigns, and using government digital technologies. These cases show that we strengthen civic space and public participation by sharing and dissemination innovation. That is crucial to COVID-19 prevention and the protection. And also, these cases shows how to maximize democratic potential of data science, the behavior insight, and the digital technologies. But we are always clear-eyed about the need to ensure safeguards and manage the downsides, unequal access, and intrusion into human right and privacy, and the spread of disinformation. Let me conclude with some of the recommendations for the future of the role of public communication for government innovation and open government. Future directions, they should be open by default and designed by default and user-centric, and data-driven, and the government as a platform. And the last thing is the anticipatory strategic foresight. These 6 different dimensions and features characteristics that should be more sophisticated and more the use and applied to the process, the public communication, policy making, and service design, especially in partnership with citizens, experts, and different other stakeholders involved in Korean culture and Korean governance. I think that this effort is highly important to overcoming of COVID-19 and sustainable development in Korean society. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Daejun. I appreciate the intervention, and I think you highlighted the role, the link of open government with a lot of the other issues that we're talking about, including trust, including issues around access to information, access to data, digital government. These are issues that open government, as you rightly note, touches on a lot of these broader principles, these broader themes. And so I think it's really important to bring that back to that conversation to show the breadth of what we're engaging with here. If I could now, I believe we are going to see a pre-recorded message from Daryl West, who's the Vice President of the Brookings Institution. I believe, yes, there you go, okay.
Thank you. It's nice to be with you, and I appreciate all of the interest in the public communications angle during the COVID pandemic. So 2020 has been a challenging year. Most countries around the world have been struggling with how to deal with COVID and seeking to protect public health in their particular countries. In the United States, we've had over 260,000 fatalities already, and this number is expected to rise to well over 300,000 by the end of December. There have been many problems in dealing with COVID in the United States. We have a federal system of government in which the national government operates in conjunction with the 50 state governments. And the problem that we've had is there actually has been little coordination across the 50 states. There's been very little national leadership. President Trump did not take COVID very seriously, and this was one of the primary reasons that he lost the election. We also have a problem in the United States just in terms of our culture is based on the notion of individual choice. And what that has meant in practice is a number of individuals have chosen not to take basic precautions, such as wearing masks and participating in contact tracing efforts. And so the spread of COVID has also taken place at a time of considerable misinformation about the nature of COVID and the risks that it presents. There have been arguments over the source of the pandemic, the nature of the risks, and the types of remedies that are appropriate to deal with it. There have been claims that it was deliberately spread, which clearly is false. Others have argued that wearing masks wouldn't make much of a difference, and that has hurt the response in the United States because many are refusing to wear masks, and therefore that is contributing to the spread of the pandemic. There is a lack of trust in the vaccines that are being developed. National public opinion surveys suggest that up to 40% of Americans say they won't take the vaccine even after it is put into widespread use. And of course, if that turns out to be the case, if that many people don't take the vaccine, that means the public health and the economic recovery risks are going to rise. Now, the good news is that the new Biden administration plans a very different approach, and one that we think will yield much more positive results. The president-elect plans a strong national coordination in terms of fighting the pandemic. Biden is going to appoint a COVID coordinator in the office of the White House who will oversee the national response. He will put more resources into distributing needed materials, protective materials for healthcare professionals, and he's going to rely much more on input from leading healthcare experts. President Biden also says he is going to have the United States rejoin the World Health Organization and focus on multilateral engagement and work with other countries to help combat it. He's developing a plan to distribute the vaccine that is going to prioritize key elements of the population, such as healthcare workers and those living in long-term care facilities. They're going to distribute the vaccines to states in proportion to the populations within each of those states. The federal government also is planning a major public education campaign in which government agencies are going to rely on television advertising to encourage people to take the vaccine and also wear masks and maintain social distancing guidelines. There's going to be social media promotion. They're going to take advantage of Twitter, Facebook, and other platforms to try and spread the word. They're also going to rely on trusted local leaders, church officials, religious leaders, people who lead community organizations, and business leaders to encourage the public to engage in responsible behavior. I think one of the biggest challenges has been the role of social media platforms. There has been a rising techlash over the large US internet platforms. There's concern that the companies are not taking effective action against false information. People want to see more done. And there also have been cyber attacks on some of our hospital and research facilities, specifically trying to find information about the vaccine that can be used by people in other countries. So it's clear that COVID is going to have a long-term impact on a variety of different activities. We already have seen an increased reliance on online learning, telemedicine, e-commerce, and remote work. We think that there's going to also be an impact on organizations, that organizations are going to flatten. They're probably not going to need as many employees. We will see an increase in automation and technology innovation. And so we expect there to be many long-term consequences in terms of both the economy and public health. Thank you very much.
Excellent. I think it's useful, particularly I'd like to highlight there, and I know Daryl's not here to comment, but I would like to highlight the role of coordination across governments. And I think with the US example is particularly interesting in the sense that it's not just, when we talk about coordination, it's not across government offices, it's also across levels of government. It's an added challenge you're seeing with the COVID response, and you see, which highlights it, but I think that's something that is relevant for governments and communicators and for open government, for dealing with, for working with citizens, for engaging with citizens. These are issues that come up. The coordination is essential. It's something that we're talking about in our international report, and I'm glad that it was highlighted there. Our final presentation of this session, before we get to the question and answer, is a pre-recorded message from Sanjay Pradhan, who's the CEO of the OGP.
Thank you. We are confronting the most devastating pandemic in 100 years. This has unleashed the worst global recession since World War II. No government, no single stakeholder group can effectively tackle these crises on its own. This requires a whole of society response, a collaborative partnership between government, citizens, civil society, and other stakeholders taking complementary actions to together tackle the pandemic. And in this societal response, citizens represent not just passive subjects or beneficiaries of public communication, but vital agents and partners in a shared struggle, taking responsible action to curb contagion and shaping and overseeing economic recovery so it achieves its intended goals. But for this, building citizen trust so citizens can serve as effective partners and collaborators is crucial. Open government can build citizen trust because it combines openness and transparent communication by government with active participation and oversight by citizens, civil society, and other stakeholders to together tackle the pandemic. So let us consider the types of open government approaches that are needed to tackle three overlapping stages of the pandemic. First, open response. Second, open recovery. Third, open reform to build back better. So first stage, open response to curb the pandemic and contagion. In South Korea, Taiwan, and New Zealand, a key to relative success has been proactive, transparent, trustworthy communication by government to citizens, empowering citizens to take responsible mitigating actions, saving lives. In China, Iran, and the US, the early delay in disclosure of threats to citizens jeopardized lives. When citizens have access to information based on which the government is issuing its health directives, citizens can better understand the challenge, trust, and better comply with reasonable restrictions to their freedom. In Australia and New Zealand, the governments released pandemic modeling, including somber data on how intensive care capacity could be overwhelmed in different scenarios. This facilitated greater appreciation and cooperation by the citizens, with strict controls being put in place to control the virus, and that led to lower infection rates than what had been originally forecast. Some governments are also ensuring prompt response to feedback to ensure they don't undermine public trust by overstepping. For instance, I know that the South Korean government very quickly updated its contact tracing practices after the South Korean National Human Rights Commission made recommendations to better protect citizen privacy. This responsiveness helped protect citizen trust, which had been built up carefully. Second stage, open recovery to save millions of livelihoods. To tackle the unprecedented COVID-19 lockdowns, governments have mobilized a staggering $12 trillion COVID-19 stimulus and safety net packages globally. Millions of lives and livelihoods are at stake. But when so much money moves so fast, there is a huge risk of corruption, capture, and waste, as we are seeing in COVID-19 scandals around the world. We need governments to openly disclose budgets and contracts so citizens can follow the money, building trust and ensuring that these packages achieve their intended goals. Through Paraguay's Mapa Inversiones and South Africa's Vulekamali platforms, governments are publishing COVID-19 funds and contracts and engaging with citizens, marginalized groups, women, and youth for feedback and oversight. In the UK and Nigeria, transparency in company ownership is empowering citizens to monitor whether COVID-19 bailouts and contracts are being captured by the politically connected. Third stage, open reform to build back better. To build back stronger democracies, we need to continue this collaborative governance between government and civil society through open government and citizen engagement. For instance, in Madrid, Paris, and Uruguay, the government has invited direct citizen participation in budgeting, empowering citizens to fund projects that respond to their needs. Through innovations like Italy's Open Coesione and Kaduna, Nigeria's Citizen Eyes and Ears, the government has disclosed the geolocation of projects and empowered citizens to serve as on-the-ground monitors of public services, providing public feedback, citizen feedback for corrective action. Institutionalizing such reforms helps build citizen trust and ensure more responsive, and accountable governance. Across all three stages, open civic space and media freedoms is a cross-cutting and essential precondition so citizens can freely shape and oversee recovery and beyond. But many governments have used the pandemic to arbitrarily restrict civic freedoms and attack civil society. In many countries, the media has been censored and restricted from reporting on COVID-19. In several countries, the right to information has been curtailed, and several leaders have undermined oversight institutions, reduced the role of legislatures, and centralized authority. These measures need to be rolled back. And instead, in order to build more resilient democracies, we need to protect civic space and media freedoms. For instance, the Tunisian government has pledged public funding for independent media to continue operating during the pandemic. Canada is strengthening online communication, democratic communication, including political advertising. And in Mexico, after the 2017 illegal surveillance scandal over civil society, the new government has committed to multi-stakeholder regulation and supervision over the state's digital surveillance. In closing, South Korea can play a vital global leadership role in advancing these types of reforms for more open response, open recovery, open reform coming out of the pandemic. Already, South Korea symbolizes open government in stark contrast and mirror opposition to closed government, which North Korea epitomizes. But furthermore, South Korea this year has already begun its term as the co-chair of the Open Government Partnership, or OGP. And in 2021, we'll be hosting the Global Summit of OGP in Seoul in December 2021, inviting all heads of states of 78 OGP member countries. In addition, a record 100 national and local OGP governments will be co-creating their OGP action plans with civil society in 2021. By role modeling domestically and inspiring globally, South Korea can lead a call to action for the partnership to advance ambitious commitments in these 100 action plans to advance transparency and citizen participation for more open response, open recovery, open reform. And through this, it can showcase open government with citizen engagement as the foundation for a new social compact to drive an effective and lasting COVID-19 response. Thank you very much.
Great. That brings us to the end of the presentations for this session. And I'm glad we ended there because I think Sanjay was able to provide a global perspective on how open government principles are enacted a number of different places, what they mean in practice, some successes, some challenges. And I think it's really useful to bring the conversation and the presentations to a close there because that global perspective highlights the lessons, the practices we can learn from each other. And I think that's the value of these events today. And I really appreciate his perspective on that. Moving forward now, I know we don't have a lot of time left, but I do want to quickly touch base again with our panelists. And I have a couple questions for Kachu and Taejun, and I know that Darryl West and Sanjay have additional presentations around just quick interventions around some questions. But Kachu, if I could turn to you first, I would like to elaborate a little bit on your presentation. It highlighted innovative ways to formulate two-way dialogue with citizens. And it'd be good to hear about how you see these processes feeding into policymaking and how you envision these initiatives shaping the discourse for recovery, but also how they may be used after COVID, as we move forward with recovery and beyond. What your experience with the dialogues teach you, the government, about implementing these moving forward?
Thank you. First, I would like to say that, of course, we don't think that this is the only method to use. So it's one among others, but we are quite enthusiastic about it, and it has already been used for many other. We have actually ongoing dialogues on the future of Finland by the Prime Minister's office, by the Ministry of Agriculture. There are dialogues about food and so forth. It is really, and we also use this to go around the country virtually in autumn, to dialogue between state and municipal leaders, to put those together and dialogue. So we feel that this is really very important, because this is, you can have a lot of data for preparatory work and policy making, but this is something that when these people discuss together, it increases, we listen and there is a lot of things coming up, but it increases everybody's understanding of the subject. We hear from other people's points of view, but we also deepen our own thoughts and now as experts and taking part in the dialogue. So we get a kind of a deeper joint understanding of what the issue is about. So these dialogues are not kind of a tool to innovate new ideas or to come up to a consensus or a solution. These are about deepening our understanding and hearing about people's experiences. And that's a vital, it cannot be the only part of course, for the policy making, but it's really, really important. And for instance, like I said, we launched the Open Government Strategy today, and we have actually now a big priority in there to increase the knowledge and training of dialogue for civil servants, as well as the use of these dialogues, because we feel that these dialogues are especially important when the subjects that you are discussing are very difficult. So it really will help those difficult areas of policy making, where you need to kind of tackle with issues that have very different opinions and and this is the way to kind of have that in the dialogue. I also want to take this opportunity, because I forgot to say something in my first or in my presentation, that what we also, because of course we also asked in each dialogue how these people who took part in the dialogues felt, did they like the dialogue, or what were their feelings about the dialogue. And the response was very overwhelming, that these dialogues about COVID-19 and their feelings, that it was almost kind of therapeutic. It gave them hope and relief in this difficult situation. So I think this is the kind of, maybe for me, this is the most important, but certainly we already have used and will use these for the policy making. But want to highlight that this is not the only tool, but one very important new tool that we haven't had so much before. So we are, like I said, quite enthusiastic and happy to report about future development in this area later on.
Yes, well, thank you. We look forward to hearing that. You're absolutely right. This is one of the tools to use. But congratulations on that. Congratulations on the strategy, and thanks for sharing that. I know we only have a few minutes left. Taijun, can I turn to you for just a couple minutes? If you could discuss what new types of multi-stakeholder partnerships and engagement you've observed that lead to more effective communication and engagement of citizens. I'll turn it over to you just a couple of minutes, please.
Thank you for questions. As noted earlier is in my presentation, in Korea, the government, the central government, and the Ministry of Culture, Sports and Tourism in charge of public communication, institution and policies, that they are making huge effort to strategically use public service announcement and digital communication and social media and a behavior change communication and information service that are very basic and are very fundamental to democracy and inclusive society. So actually these actions and catalyze a collective activism for open government and encourage greater uptake of collective wisdom for open government and build up good governance, very well informed communication ecosystem and critical citizenship for an open government. The Korea and the public communication is well aligned with the media ecosystem. They are understanding very well about the media culture, media consumption behaviors, and media marketplace. Second is the data and the digital technologies and the default and the use to ensure value for money and communication effectiveness in public sector communication. The last thing is education and information literacy campaign, very strong. That is mutual learning and mutual dialoguing and mutual interacting between government and citizens in terms of making better governance and a better policies and a better culture in a public sector. In the years to come, Ministry of Culture and Sport and Tourism and OECD and KDIs and even other countries will be able to inspire new ways of working and thinking and enhance the skills and knowledge through policy communication lab project and joint project designed to help policymakers and a think tank and the civil service societies, scholars, and international organizations, and even lay citizens to co-create and co-produce genuinely effective, user-centric public communication in Korean society and other countries. The KDI already started an initiative and working with the Malaysian government, Ministry of Health, in order to share knowledge and information about good practices and campaigns of COVID-19 public communication campaigns. I think in the coming future, all of the countries must be very concerned about how to increase the social cognition, acceptance, and even public participation in the process of vaccinations against the COVID-19. So I think a global action and innovation should be geared toward the making very strong behavioral campaigns as for increasing social acceptance of vaccination in COVID-19.
Excellent. Thank you. We have 5 minutes left. Unfortunately, I don't know if we'll be able to get to the videos. I think it would be unfair to cut the videos off of our colleagues, Daryl and Sanjay, though we do have time for one quick lightning question for Kachu and Taijun, if you're amenable to that. So quickly, looking forward, as taking the intense experiences of the last few months, of almost last year, what you've learned, what you've done, what you've put in place, what do you think the key lessons are? Say 1 or 2 key lessons for you in the new phase of the pandemic and for the future recovery. Kachi, let me start with you.
I maybe just give one key lesson, and I think that's partnership. It goes to the public communication, but it's also to other areas. I think we've done that before, but I think this crisis has shown that how important that is between different levels of and different actors in the society. So that's my answer: partnership.
Perfect, thank you. Taijun, could I ask you the same question? What do you think the key lessons for you on the new phase of the pandemic, what you've learned from the past and how that's going to affect the future recovery and moving forward?
The open government is very important, the ideologies and the policy concept too, the use of the public communication and the citizen participation. So in the coming, the future, and Korean government and many countries across OECD, I think the public communication should be geared to the policy process and the governance design and even public value co-creation. But I would like the public communication be more the strategy and more efficient and effective and even the ethical. So the many participants and the stakeholders involved in the policy process that would like to join the process of making public communication campaigns, the public communication messages, the public communication media, and even public communication culture. So in the coming future and public communication for open government, they should be able to make a venue, an avenue, and even platform for inviting the numerous kinds of the stakeholders and actors interested in and involved in policy process and governance design and good governance culture in country and in global community.
Great, thank you. We have, I think, informed we have one question from the floor. We have 2 minutes left to ask the one question from the floor. I'll turn it over to the moderators.
Right, so we will take one question from the floor. If you could raise your hand, we will give you the microphone. And I think the lady in the back raised her hand first. So, oh, sorry. Right, sorry. I think the gentleman on the second row raised his hand first. So we will quickly get to him. And please state your question, who you are and who your question is addressed to.
Okay, hello, my name is Sang-woo Park and I'm from KDI School. I have one question for Ms. Kachor-Curry. I believe Finland is one of the most successful countries among the OECD with social capital-driven open government and public governance innovation. Also, I'm aware that recent policy experience using AI and PPP startup innovation networks are known to be your best implementation. I wonder how Finland proactively forecasts policy issues imposing great uncertainty and complexity to the existing government system and market economy, such as COVID-19 and AI, and how you strengthen the communication capabilities of public officials in order to communicate this effectively with its members of society.
Thank you. That's a very big question. I'm trying to get a quick answer. Well, to the last point, like I said, there are 4 priorities in our open government strategy that we published today, and to increase also the knowledge and capacities and capabilities of our civil servants in public communication is one priority for the future, especially in these times of AI and digitalized media and all that. So that's a very important thing. For the other part, maybe I take up an example, because that's always nice to work with the OECD, and we actually have an ongoing project with the OECD on anticipatory innovative governance, where we are looking exactly about those kinds of things and how to make our public governance more proactive instead of reactive, how we can actually shape the future towards the kind of future we want, and not just making scenarios and looking wondering which scenario will be true, but actually kind of trying to make our governance such that we can affect that we get the future that we wanted. Of course, not entirely possible, but maybe you see what I'm trying to say, that to a more proactive way of shaping our world. So that's the quick answer to this question. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. I think we'll have to end it there. I just want to flag again, kind of reiterate the messages from the DSG's conversation this morning, the first session, this session, that really these challenges around open government, or the challenges of implementing open government principles of promoting effective public communication, both to share information and increase dialogue and conversation, really stresses and highlights the role that everybody has to play in combating the pandemic and also the recovery after that. And the way that we build these partnerships and foster collective effort will be key to our success moving forward. So thank you everyone for their contributions, for their time. This is a really excellent event. We appreciate all the help from the side in Korea on the logistics. So thank you for everyone again, and we look forward to having many more of these conversations together.
Thank you, Craig. Well, I think that wraps up our second and final session today. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. And again, a special thank you to Mr. Craig Matisic for wonderfully leading this session, and our invited speakers as well, Ms. Kachor-Curry, Dr. David Hedgen-Lee, Dr. Daryl M. West, and Dr. Sanjay Pradhan, who joined us virtually through a pre-recorded message. I believe a strong round of applause is in order. Well, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, this concludes our online international conference.